Good evening, everybody. My name is Cherokee Wooley, and the youth pastors had just asked if I would take a few minutes tonight to share with you a little bit about our family's experience here at Trinity. And while I don't think that parenting ever really comes to an end, my husband Lane and I are about to send our youngest child off to college and begin a new season of life with an empty nest. We moved to Birmingham when our first child was just an infant. We left a great church home in Atlanta that we loved, and we don't have family here in town, so we kind of found ourselves in a new city with a new baby and not really knowing where to turn. I remember saying it felt like we were walking on a tightrope with no net, because I really wasn't sure where our first phone call would be if we had a major life event and needed somebody. But Trinity was a natural fit for us. We found a Sunday school class that we love, that we've been a part of for almost 25 years. And those initial connections that we made here have proven to be a really big part of the spiritual and the social fabric of our lives. I'd like to share one quick story from when our children were little. We are balcony people. Shout out to the balcony people. And we were here one Sunday with our kids in the balcony, all three of them, and they were little, and I had, straight up lost my religion getting them to church that day. And they were awful during church, and I would love to tell you that that was the exception, but it was not. My children would tell you they've never been well behaved in church. But this particular day, they were giggling one minute and hitting each other the next minute. They were dropping hymnals, they were dropping crayons. Most of all, they were kicking the pew in front of us, all of it. And so, of course, I kept apologizing to everybody around us, and I was saying, oh, I'm so sorry, excuse us. Well, when the service was over and everybody stood up to leave, an older lady who was seated in front of us stood up and turned around to me, and she got her finger out like this, and she said, let me tell you something. And so, of course, I braced for the worst. I figure I totally deserve whatever she's about to dish out. And she said to me, you don't ever have to apologize to me for anything your kids do in this church. I know what it took to get them here, and they are always welcome. Well, right then and there, we knew we were in the right place for the long term. And so we continued to make an effort to get them here. For Sunday school, for worship on Sunday mornings, for children's choirs on Wednesday evenings, for vacation Bible school in the summer, just regular, routine church attendance. All right, fast forward now to the time when our oldest child is about to go to middle school. I live here in the Edgewood area, and so I had seen these big middle school kids walking down from Homewood Middle School to the Chevron or whatever, and I was 100% convinced that my child was absolutely not ready for middle school. So I made an appointment at Homewood Middle School and told them I'd like to speak with somebody to discuss my options. And they set me up to speak with, I think her title was the Assistant Principal for Academic Instruction. Turns out it was a really nice lady named Linda Erickson. Well, if you don't know Linda Erickson, she knows a thing or two about education, and she knows a thing or two about raising children. Her son is now our senior pastor. I think she's got some awesome grandkids sitting out here tonight. So anyway, I explained to Ms. Erickson that my child is not ready to attend middle school, and I'd like to discuss other options. Maybe homeschooling is better, maybe a smaller setting. Ms. Erickson listened. She very diplomatically says to me, I understand your concern. I encourage you to explore all your options, but you're kidding yourself if you think that middle school is a bed of roses under any setting. What Ms. Erickson did not say, but what she totally knew, is that my children were ready for middle school. I was the one that was not ready for the letting go. Because the fact is, middle school, junior high, high school, are all very transitional times. I think they're especially challenging because our children are beginning to define themselves separate and apart from us. And for me, it was really hard to let go, to acknowledge that they are separate, distinct, unique individuals. They were sent to live with us for a time, but ultimately they are God's children, and their path is not my path to determine. Lane and I always hope to guide and direct our children in the right direction, but sometimes we don't know what that is. So we kind of leaned in and continued to make the effort to get them here, even on days when they didn't want to be here. So for events like Discovery Weekend, for worship on Sunday mornings, for Element Youth Ministry on Sunday nights, for their Fusion Fall small group Bible studies during the week, and even mission trips in the summer. All of this was just kind of laying a foundation for our children to know that there were other people, other voices that they could rely on besides ours. And I'll tell you, in the getting them here, we continued to develop those relationships that gave us a safety net of a church community that we could rely on. I think for us, sometimes as adults, that's as simple as a note of encouragement, or somebody saying, we're praying for you guys this week. Sometimes it's a more active ministry that I like to call the ministry of carpools and casseroles. And whether you have been on the giving or the receiving end of carpools and casseroles, I think you know how important that can be. I'm just a firm believer that life in general, but especially parenting, is not meant to be done alone. We had a great storyteller that came here to Trinity several years ago named Dolores Hydock. And she told this great story about how her aging mother absolutely refused to go to any place called assisted living because she didn't want anybody helping her. And so Dolores Hydock tells about how she set her mother up in her own home, but she had to set up this elaborate network of church friends to help her mother. Everything from yard work to bringing meals to helping her with her medication to just coming to visit. And of course, the conclusion of the whole story was, we are all in assisted living. I think we're just all made to rely on each other. And as our children continue to grow, we realize our ability as parents and even our role as parents became more and more limited. Our children kind of started to develop their own community as well. They started to listen to a lot of other voices, and our voices began to get drowned out. And I think this is where our relationship with the church has been especially important. Because with each of our children, there came a time when the lines of communication at our house just kind of broke down. And we didn't have the words to say what we needed to say to deal with a particular situation. Or really, we thought we had the words, but they just didn't want to hear the words from us. And in each of those times, we've been able to pick up the phone and call Trinity. And without fail, somebody from the youth staff has been available for us. I remember the first time I made that call, it was more than 10 years ago. David Thompson was the youth pastor. And I called David and said, we just were not communicating well with our son Timothy. And I remember David saying, well, why don't you just drop him off here at the church after school? And I said, yeah, I'm pretty sure he's not going to want to do that. And David said, I know he's not going to want to do that. Just drop him off after school. And so I did. And to this day, I don't know what they talked about. I think they just played ping pong for an hour. But it let Timothy know that there were other people besides us who cared about him and were willing to invest in him and understood him better than we did and were willing to listen. I remember making that same call for my second son, Matt, and Robert Sturdivant was the youth pastor, and I dropped back off unwillingly after school one day, and then later on I said, hey Matt, how was your talk with Robert? Bye. That's all I got. And then I said, what'd y'all talk about? Nothing. And then later, very casually, Max said, Robert just said a bunch of stuff about how you and Dad love me, and that's why y'all have all these rules. Yep. Those were the words that we had been saying, but he didn't want to hear them from us. And let me say in my own defense that I don't think asking for help means you're a bad parent. It just means that you care enough to recognize somebody else might be better equipped for certain situations than you are. I once heard a CEO of a major corporation give a speech, and I just say that to make it sound fancy because it was actually Sarah Blakely. If you don't know who that is, y'all, she invented Spanx. She is a billionaire for inventing underwear, basically. But anyway, anyway, Sarah Blakely, the CEO of a major corporation, says that the key to success is to always be willing to hire your weakness. I think as a parent that just means, A, recognizing the areas that are not your strengths, and then be humble enough to be willing to let somebody else step in to help. In a church setting, I think that works best when you have invested that time on the front end to help build those relationships so that when you need to pick up the phone and ask for help, the people on the other end know who you are, they know your family, they know what your values are, and most importantly, they know who your children are, and they can just meet them right where they are. I love these verses from Ecclesiastes that Mallory read tonight. I think it's a biblical way of acknowledging there are a lot of different seasons in life, and life is not always a bed of roses. Figuring out who you are as a parent, or as a student, or just as a human in general can be really complicated and messy. And sometimes it's tough, and it is fine to feel sad or angry or hurt. I just think it's really important to have a place to turn on the days when things get tough. People who can share those burdens with us. For us, Trinity has been that place. And I hope you hear this as words of encouragement, but also as an invitation. If your family is looking for a church home, or if, like a lot of us, you've just maybe been unplugged from church for like the last 2 years, I hope you'll just think of this weekend as a good time to kind of reboot, kind of start back to get plugged into the routine of church. Ecclesiastes chapter 3, verse 2 says there's a time to plant and a time to uproot. And we planted some seeds here. I'm fine, it's fine. We planted seeds here almost 25 years ago. And in about 5 months and 8 days, we're going to drop that last child off at college. We're going to start a new season. And our prayer for each of our children is just that the seeds we planted were the right seeds, and that they're rooted in their faith, and that they know who they are, that they know whose they are, separate and apart from us. So I'd just like to close by offering you guys these same words that Miss Mary Lynn Johnson said to me in the balcony all those years ago. You do not ever have to apologize for anything that you have done or not done as a parent. I know what it takes to get them here. And your children are always, always welcome. Thank you.